let's call this joint meeting to order. This is the Brattleboro Planning Commission, the Development Review Board, and the Design Review Committee having a joint meeting. Let's start with announcements, and together, meshed with that, if anybody has any questions about the agenda, feel free to bring those up, but also let's just start the announcements with introductions. Since we're here trying to meet each other and establish some common understanding of our town goals and town plan and land use regs, and both the writing of them and the implementation. Let's just start with names and anything else you want to say. So I'll go first. I'm Tom Mosikowski, the chair of the Planning Commission.
Maya Hasegawa, the chair of the Development Review Board and a member of the Design Review Committee.
Barbara George, member of the Design Review Committee.
Gary Stroud, member of the DRB and Planning Commission.
Michael April, DRB.
Catherine Turnus, DRB.
Brian Bannon, Design Administrator and DRB Clerk.
Nora Dissinger, Vice Chair DRB and on the DRC as well.
Robin Sweetapple, Design Review Committee.
Chris Mays, Brattleboro former.
All eyes on you.
And Farmies, Chair of the Conservation Commission.
Thank you for all the comment.
Steve?
Oh, we're not.
I didn't know if we were.
I should turn my video on.
Hi, Sarah. I'm on the Planning Commission.
Steve? Sue? I think everyone knows
I'm
about it.
Sue Fillion. I'm the planning director, staff the Planning Commission, I'm DRC.
Hi, I'm Steve Hayes. I'm the planning technician, and I staff all four boards.
Great. Is there any announcements anybody has that doesn't pertain to the agenda items, but maybe events or anything they want to say? Anything to frame the conversation, more so than the agenda spells out, or no need to? Yep. So
Sure, I'll just let the other boards and committees know that the Planning Commission received a bylaw modernization grant, so we are looking at some land use regulations to reduce barriers to housing. So that, was kind of one of the impetuses for getting together. Is every couple of years, it's a really great idea to meet with the boards that are implementing the land use regulations to give feedback to the Planning Commission as they are writing regulations. So it's been quite some time, and we thought I know Tom and Maya had conversations that it would be a good time to do it. So thanks everybody for coming tonight.
yeah, thank you.
Excuse me, did anything come out of that infill kind of survey? Is that relevant to this? When you did your walkarounds and everything, I don't know if we heard back about that.
Yeah, we're still pulling together the strings from that, but that's definitely building into what we're going to be taking into account when we decide how to tweak the regulations for housing. So we'll make sure to distribute that out to all the boards.
Okay, and
We get one more person just chimed in.
oh, Lena, yeah, she's an interested member of the public. Yeah, so people, we have 3 agenda items in general. The first one talking about the roles of these 3 government bodies, and I plan on that. We don't have to spend much time on that unless people have questions or proposals or clarifications or anything really to say about that. And then going through the land use regs, not page by page, but there was quite a list produced by the DRB and the DRC about cannabis or the historic districts or setbacks, parking, all sorts of things. So I expect there will be quite a few comments or proposals or quandaries about that. And then the last item is any additional tools that the 3 bodies or members of them may desire to better implement their roles. And so I hope we can keep this kind of high level and not get into the real details and debating things, but I think we should be bouncing ideas back and forth amongst each other and expressing, our thoughts and perspectives. So,
I think we should each say a couple sentences about what we do in case somebody's going to be watching this, hopefully.
yep.
That's not here, and say what the planning commission
Sure.
does, and talk about DRB, and you can talk about DRC.
Sure.
Just briefly.
That sounds good. Yeah, well, let's get right into the roles of these three government bodies. You all will have seen in the background material I put together this just kind of pages of excerpts from the town charter, the town plan, the land use regs, and state statute. And I'll just read right from it, at least in terms of the Planning Commission, being the chair of it. This commission, the Planning Commission, is charged with setting the overall policy and goals for development in town. It prepares the town plan and any amendments, as well as other planning reports and studies, and prepares amendments to the zoning and subdivision ordinances. That's what we do. It's kind of it's a quasi-legislative body writing rules, or that need to be approved by the select board.
And I guess the Development Review Board is, if you're the legislative body, then we are the
Quasi.
executive or the
Judicial.
implemental. Judicial?
Yeah.
Ruling.
Well, partially judicial and partially implementing. No? No?
I think judicial.
I do too.
Yeah, more judiciary, yeah.
Well, but we have to take what's written and interpret for each application that comes before us for development. And the reason why I say implement is because we also have to interpret. And I don't know if that's totally judicial. Our rulings are judicial, we're on the record, and we have to swear in witnesses. So we are quasi-judicial, but we also have to read and implement what's each situation.
In the DRC?
The Design Review Committee doesn't have any power. It's not regulatory. All we do is advise, and the reason we advise is because there are certain areas of town that have overlay districts of where there is design control. For instance, the downtown, there's design rules for the downtown. And there's a couple of historic districts that have that also. So because the DRB doesn't have experts on its board about these overlay historic preservation topics, there's a separate advisory committee, and that's in legislation that in Vermont that there can be these advisory committees. And so we give advice about things that affect these overlay districts. Is that, you want to add anything?
No, that sounds good.
All right.
No, we also try to follow the.
Oh, you do? That's really good.
No, I mean, the DRC tries to follow the national parks
Yes,
regulations.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah. Right.
Yeah, and so this is a joint meeting of these three bodies, but I will just say that there's a couple others involved in the implementation, interpretation, everything, all facets of the land use regs. I mean, we mentioned the select board kind of being the top body there, but the administrative officer, Brian Bannon, is doing some rulings as well and enforcement for sure. And you could speak for yourself if you want, but you don't need to say too much necessarily. And then there's two other advisory committees which could play a role, the Conservation Commission and the Technical Review Committee, all made up of staff members. So we'll get to more about that if we'd like to later in the meeting. Is there anything else anybody would like to mention about the roles or problems they see with it, or questions or additions for some future charter change? I don't know, anything at all related to this agenda topic? Wasn't meant to be much, just a little primer. Or
No, I talked to Ian Goodnow yesterday a little bit, and he said this was a good time for us to be doing this because of the charter review.
Okay,
that's going on. So we're very timely.
great. Yeah, so people see that our role is defined in, the charter and the plan and the land use regs and statutes, so people can review that at their leisure and brainstorm on it. Should we just move on to the land use regs, concerns, and proposals that people have thought of and either pre-prepared and shared, by email or have with us right now?
We should just go down this.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we can go in order of that kind of random list there. That's fine with me.
Can I just ask a background question? I have my copy of the land use regs, but I saw in the supplements that there have been revisions.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one place where you can find the revisions and sort of update your own copy, or did it all get blended in?
It's on the planning department's webpage.
Yeah, the land use regulations that are on the website that have been uploaded are complete. If you want, I can get out a list of what had been amended.
Just what the changes are?
Yeah.
That would be
You
really
can do
great.
that. Okay.
Good.
I have that all from the public hearing phase, so I'll get that to you.
I know the DRB and DRC generated most, if not all, of this list here. So, do you guys want to start us off with however you'd like to share some of these ideas?
We want to talk about cannabis, Nora?
Do I?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Or Michael? We've had a couple of requests for,
Conditional use.
conditional use review for cannabis grow sites. And we have nothing in the regulations.
Right.
So we've been treating it as if it were farms.
The first one.
The first one is a farm.
Because it was outside.
It was outside.
No, well, it's an indoor grow, but it's an agricultural area. But the
it's
second
on a
one,
farm.
we had more the state,
Close neighbors.
Yeah.
right, the second one, we had more of the state information at that point. And so now we treat it like mixed manufacturing, right?
Yeah. Have you all seen that table that's
Yeah.
staff put together? I mean, that's not necessarily what the DRB has to
Yes.
follow. That's the staff is going to treat it, at least I personally think it's reasonable. But yeah. So what do you? I was thinking that we should add to the what is it, the use definitions towards the end of the land use regs, where it spells out the definition of a single family home, of a mining operation, etc. Something about cannabis, but then I thought no other sort of thing is defined that way. The closest thing is there's beverage manufacturing, but there's no other type of manufacturing spelled out there. There's just miscellaneous manufacturing. It's not like manufacturing of toys, tool manufacturing. It doesn't go into that detail. What are some things you guys are looking for?
Well, some of the concerns, I think, might be rolled into the nuisance areas there, as far as the possibility of having odors and things being released from the growth area, especially if you're doing it in a populated area. And that's one of my concerns, that when we reviewed it lately, was trying to see if we can figure out a way to put our fingers on these things, because it's, an awful lot of these things, it's nice to have detailed numbers that you can put to it,
So you're saying the nuisance section, in your opinion, doesn't currently have, isn't good enough for cannabis? There should be something more specific in nuisance?
Yeah, it seems a little gray.
Okay.
Could you make it similar to how you handle gravel pits? So you have a whole group of, in this document, there's a lot on how to deal and handle gravel pits, to the pitch and slope, how to refill it once it, you're done with the gravel pit. You have definite expectations on how to handle these things. So maybe it could fall under that, because that reason why I think you have it for the gravel pits is because it is sort of a nuisance, and it could also be slightly dangerous, whereas this is more nuisance. But that might be how you could handle something like that, is to have, I don't know exactly where it is. Do either of you?
Isn't that called
Yeah,
a special use?
It's a special use standards.
It might be worthwhile incorporating something specifically for, indoor growth. Like you say, you have a special section identifying gravel pits, and it seems as of late that growing marijuana in town's gonna be a big thing.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Just to think about, and we could include things like noise from the exhaust fans and odor and water discharge.
All right.
Which are the
I would
three-
argue water discharge is not in our purview. They get state permits on discharges.
Even on the sewer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah, oh
you're
no,
right,
they,
you're right.
the state gets really dicey about the strength of what you're
Yeah.
putting
They have
into
to get
the.
town and state, so.
Can I ask what folks are finding is missing from the existing nuisance standards? Like 324 is our odor section, and then we've got a few other things that we were just hearing about. Is there anything that might need to change in that section that would
No.
apply to all uses?
I think what we're looking for is a specific section about cannabis growing.
Sure, but I'm talking specifically about the controlling for nuisances that might relate to that use. It would seem that other than including them in the special use, accessory use section, we're typically using this nuisance and hazard prevention standards
Well-
to cover all uses.
Basically, your odor, you got one sentence in there.
Sure.
Basically say if you can smell it, it's bad. It might be, just doing some research into it before our last meeting, there are all sorts of different ways to control the smell of growing marijuana. I mean, the VOCs that come off of the stuff is, it can permeate things all over the place. I mean, you drive by a pot store in Massachusetts or whatever, and you've been there. So it's, there are a number of technologies that can be used for that, and it might be worthwhile to.
You're saying, because that would be more preemptive than the current odor one sentence, which is more,
Yeah.
they would just promise that it's not going to smell. but
Right.
then
And
it
then
very well may.
then you've got complaints
Okay.
and.
Well, noted, right, but we don't want to get too much into the details
Right.
here at this meeting.
I think we also
Catherine?
need to understand,
Oh.
the limits of our authority a little bit better than before, we could even, if the planning commission wished to understand that, because some of this seems to possibly be, just pushing that a little bit. So I'd want to be sure, speak to
Oh,
the town
sure.
attorney if we were to do
I mean, I'm
anything.
Yeah.
personally taking this down as something that DRB
Yeah.
cares about and that we'll give, consideration to, but we'll do our research.
Is that a consideration also refining how they're refining it too? Because it's sort of like when like with Mocha Joe, when you could smell the beans when they're refined the same way refineries work. You want to know how are they processing it, and like you said with the odor, there's different ways of processing marijuana. So you want to figure out, okay, how are they processing, who's regulating, who's watching it, who's
That's not the
overlooking.
town.
So, like you said, that smell coming from, like, say, a building, to say, oh, it's gonna be great, but next minute, the whole building is.
I would also say that, we've had issues with coffee roasting in town, and our
Yeah.
regulations have always been sufficient to enforce with, so.
But exactly, someone else might be good.
Catherine?
I think my concern is you're referring to cannabis as to the only the portion of the plant that you can actually inhale or whatever, or hemp, which would be a wonderful growth to have. Can that be separated between the two? I mean,
I don't even know the term, I mean, we wouldn't call it cannabis if it was hemp, right? Isn't that, is
well,
it,
that's
is
what I'm
that
asking. Do
agriculture?
you have
That's
something
correct.
on the books
Yeah.
for the actual, for hemp growing?
We don't have the authority to
Hemp is
regulate
agricultural.
that. Yeah,
Right.
it's preempted by state statute.
Yeah.
So what
can-
you're saying is cannabis is not agricultural?
In the world of state statute.
Turns out it's
You're
not.
gonna get
Well,
into
it's
kind of
weeds.
agricultural, but it's not really agricultural.
So,
Point.
Wow.
anything else about cannabis?
List of them.
Okay. All right, moving on. Next on the list was something about setbacks. I know nothing.
I don't know who brought up setbacks. John, is it you?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I did listen to him when he was talking about it, I guess, an awful lot of it, and what we're starting to see it now, trying to increase the density throughout the town. And one of the first places you kind of look is, setbacks is if you can, that tends to be showing up more. And the two of them might very well go, the increased density, you're gonna come closer to your property lines lots of times.
Yeah, in addition to the current properties that aren't conforming to the current regs.
Well, yeah,
Like
but
my
they're
entire
there.
neighborhood. Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that's really gonna be looked at by our consultant for the zoning for housing project, right? At least with the developed districts. We won't be looking in the rural and, rural residential districts very much.
Generally speaking, that's not, you
The concern you guys have.
you bigger lots and
Yep.
staying away from a property line is not as difficult there.
I think we're gonna be looking at that, right? For
Yeah.
place senses, for
And
every.
staff is currently doing some research into that as well, trying to figure out where we're the furthest off, where the regulations are the furthest apart from the real built form that we see. So we'll publish that out to everyone. When
I mean,
that's
there's
finished.
also the fire issue, so that's part of the reason why I think the setbacks are the way they are to begin with, is so that fire doesn't jump, built from building lot to building lot. At least that's how it started ages ago. I don't know what the real, but there's, in the building codes, there's a limit to, depending on the type of construction, how far away you can be from another edifice.
Is there a consultant, or is that in the future?
There is, yeah, they were hired a month ago or so, and it's every month. Anyway, it's Place Sense is the organization. It's run by one person, Brandy Saxon, and she should have the project, finished in December. by the end of
Brandy's
this year.
great, she did these
Yeah.
Right.
with you guys.
Yeah, so she's well suited to revise them.
So then,
Amendment.
in the future, maybe when we're considering setbacks, then the kind of construction would come into the equation somehow, possibly.
Possibly, yeah.
And that'd be fine. We just need to know kind of the rules.
Right.
We've been getting a number of requests recently for waivers
Yeah.
of setbacks.
Yeah.
In the
Which,
developed areas,
yes,
Yes.
Yes.
water and sewer areas, yeah.
Are you finding it side, rear, everywhere?
Primary building, accessory building.
rear and side mostly.
That's the only one you can get away.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have a
Rear
front
and
setback.
side.
Yeah, I think Tom's question, primary structure or accessory?
Primary.
We've had a few accessories too, like the.
Oh, we had
porch.
that porch next
Yep.
to Dr. Jarrell's office,
Right.
which they haven't built yet.
No.
Wasn't that like 2 months ago?
Yeah.
Barbara, anything to say from a historic overlay kind of district, you kind of,
It's kind of scary.
there you go.
I mean, I was thinking about how we have jurisdiction over Canal Clark Street, but there's 10 more neighborhoods in Brattleboro that are just have just as much historic character as Canal Clark Street, but somebody took the trouble to put that, I mean, we know who the somebody was, but they did it for a reason. Canal Clark Street, we had to look at it and say, oh, no, you can't do that porch. Oh, you have to have wood windows and all that. Meanwhile, 90% of the town is just as much historic character as that. And that's a thing that just doesn't seem fair or right.
I mean, it gets a little demoralizing when you're
We've
talking
segued
about that.
into
Yes.
historic research,
Well,
overlay
no,
district, which is
but I
fine.
mean,
think
this has
we
to
can take that.
do with adding.
Yep.
Because you start adding things, changing rules for those, all these neighborhoods.
Mhm.
You're talking about residential. There's only one that we have any jurisdiction over, or two if you count West Brattleboro. And yet, those are all historic districts, really.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what their character is. So you're gonna make these new rules, but meanwhile, you know, only one of those neighborhoods is called historic in your zoning.
So are they getting
So-
penalized for being in an historic neighborhood? Because there's a different level of care and character, whereas the whole town has care and character. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. So window replacements is sort of a perfect place to go. Queen Anne Victorian and everybody all of a sudden puts in 1/1 vinyl replacement windows, say. So they're all vinyl. So what does that do to the historic character of the building? We struggle with that sometimes. Or aluminum siding. I mean, nobody wants to paint, but you know, there's ways to do it where it's not completely upsetting to the character. But
Preservation.
the only place we're really worried about the character of the neighborhoods is these couple of pockets. And a lot of that was, I think, and Barbara can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was to preserve those neighborhoods so someone can't just buy a bunch of buildings, knock them down and put up a Butler building, which is basically like a metal building. So that's I believe the idea was to take these sort of neighborhoods that might be in transition and make sure that they remain the character because of historically they had some relevance when those neighborhoods developed. So it's not just the architecture and safety, life safety. It's also the character of the town and like were these houses for the cotton mill? Were these houses for SD Oregon? So it is a thing that we constantly talk about without any authority whatsoever.
Another way to think about it is,
Yeah.
I mean, to increase the density, you're gonna have additions, and you're gonna have new entrances on the outsides and that kind of thing. If it's in Canal Clark Street, we're gonna see it and we're gonna say, oh, that stair should be wood or something like that. But if it's over here, like right out there, Oak Street or any of those places, who's gonna say? Do we want to have different standards for Canal Clark Street than Oak Street and all these other places, Estyville and all that? So that's a big concern of the Design Review Committee. Not that we really want to be caring about everybody's addition to their place, but really, you're changing those neighborhoods when you're doing that, and you need to do it in a good way.
And you're saying
So-
there's just as much, but maybe slightly different historic value in those other neighborhoods.
There are more.
More.
Some of them are more.
No, that's one thing I've
Oh,
noticed, that to
yeah.
me, the Horton Homestead and Clark Canal neighborhoods, in fact, compared to a lot of the neighborhoods around here in the buildings, they have the lowest quality building, the least historical features. They're just
Historic-
simple buildings and they're just.
Historic is not
So,
about quality.
I mean, architectural features is the word I meant. And so, to me, the what's valuable there is the intimate compactedness and density and closeness, and the streets are so narrow and the lots are so small. So kind of fusing the setbacks with the historic. So, yeah, so I found it, I mean, certainly there's individual historic properties that are listed on the register.
Not
One-off,
many.
but not many, yeah.
Not-
But there's yeah, so it's funny that what's the way, to me, that what's being preserved in the historic district is the architectural features of the least architecturally valuable buildings in downtown.
No,
In my opinion.
the National Register is a register. It's not about protection.
Yeah.
It's about what is historic. It's not about architecture.
I'm saying you guys are overseeing
It's
it.
not about architecture, it's about history. So Canal Clark Street has a history. Estyville has a history. Oak Grove, or neighborhood up there, has a history.
Yeah.
They were all built for a reason, because things were happening in Brattleboro. The National Register is about history. The National Register is not about protection, has nothing to do with protection. You can paint it pink,
Yeah.
you can put aluminum siding on it.
Yeah.
Only the local designation, the overlay district, is the only thing that makes protection for those neighborhoods. That's what you have to face. And here all this time, we've been saying, oh, put it on the National Register to be protected.
No.
No, not at all. I mean, I can put aluminum siding on the slate-sided SD buildings if I
Say that out
want.
loud.
They're on the National Register, so what?
So it's about
I mean-
preservation in a sense. You're preserving history. You're
Well, the
keeping-
National Register
intact.
is a register of what is significant. That's
Historic.
mostly more about over 50 years old
Agreed.
and still has integrity.
Yes.
Now, that's kind of a value judgment, but that's what the National Register is. It's a register, just like your car gets registered and the National Register gets registered. You can look up all these buildings that they say these have, history, and they haven't been changed too much. But when you get into design review and all that, and zoning and that's nothing to do with the National Register at all.
But it seems like they are
That's,
hand in hand.
that is a
In
public
this town.
misconception.
In this town, they've been chosen to overlap.
We
But that's
have,
now sort of
Yeah, no,
illegal,
it's-
right?
well,
We'll
It's
get to
not, it's
that.
not illegal the way that they were done.
Yeah.
we regularly, I
It's not
mean,
recommended.
all the time, Steve will write up things for us, and one of the questions on the applications is whether it fits in with the character of the neighborhood,
Right,
which
right.
is, would kind of, but generally speaking, the answer is yes, and move on. It's, I suppose if somebody wanted to put up a,
Well, change
What-
is important and development is important, obviously, but the issue is, so in historic preservation, there's this nice little book. And one of the things is if a building is historically relevant, things that you don't want to change are some of the architectural features because they delineate it into a particular part of time. So turned columns on a porch, or Queen Anne Victorian's lattice work. There's a lot of different, I'm just kind of picking the easy ones. So you have this ability to see where the openings are. If you want to close a window, you can close that window, but you have to leave the indentation of where the opening was. So it's to preserve that as you make those changes, so that somebody could look at it and say, oh, so that's where the front door was originally. Not where the heck is the door now because it's 10 apartments and I don't know where to go. It's being able to preserve that character from the street, and it's really the street sides that we're always worried about. We don't really go in the backyards. We don't worry about that. If they want to put a giant staircase, we're like, okay, because it's the streetscape, how you feel about that neighborhood, and we keep coming back to character. But the historic relevance is what gives the town character. And that was the beautiful thing that, I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at what Maya sent in her email about South Carolina, about Charleston? Charlotte?
Charleston.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You had looked at Charlotte Demolition.
Yeah, I think that was the,
We looked at Charlotte once.
because that's the one that I was
What I
most
sent
familiar with.
was Charleston.
So they have a really interesting way that they deal with change and historic preservation, and it has something to deal with what we go through today and the pressures but also retaining that flavor and that historic relevance of not so much just the structure, but the relevance of those structures in that neighborhood at that particular time. It's really like setting it in time. Is
Context.
Yeah,
Context.
that's why I sent that, because, and that's in response to this thing that's on here about historic overlay districts, is the design review committee's been talking about how we go about creating more historic overlay districts. And I guess what Robin and Barbara are saying is that we don't want the other regs that we change for just the rest of town to have a negative impact on the potential for historic preservation.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Do you have an example?
We're not going to tell you all houses have to be white with green shutters. Was that helpful? I don't know.
There you go.
I mean, is there anything in our regs you can think of that is
Here, now
currently
here's
doing
an
that?
example. Say you're trying to make more housing, so people can convert their garages into.
Oh, the setbacks, you brought that up.
Yeah,
If
I
we-
mean, this
yeah.
relates to more housing and infill. So you have a nice garage made out of wood, has old garage doors and all that. So in your encouraging, in our new rules maybe, of helping people to turn that garage into housing, what features are you going to care about? Because if it's just a zoning question, yes, they can have housing in there. So they're going to put some overhead door or some, I mean, amazing things people could do. Just, so how much, you have to think about this when you're going to do it in a historic neighborhood, not a designated historic neighborhood, a neighborhood that has a history. You have to think, do we want to have any say over what materials, what features they're going to have on these conversions to residential? Because it's great. People have in history, 200 years in Brattleboro, have been putting extensions on and putting people in their garages and everything, carriage houses and all that. But think about it. You're going to try to encourage it. What control do you want to have over the way they do it? That's what the design review is about, and it doesn't have jurisdiction over all those things. But maybe in your rules, you can have jurisdiction, or you can make them up in some way. Yeah.
So I think it comes down to, like, one of the things we look at, as Michael said, is the appropriateness, or has the proposed change fit into the neighborhood or the character of the neighborhood. Maybe some more definition around what does that really mean? What's the character of the neighborhood? So that
And that
whatever.
wording is in that HRO section, and you're saying that it should
Mhm.
have some more specificity?
So architecturally, it has to be
No,
preserved. in that.
Well, it depends very much, like I said, in context. So
Yeah,
you don't want to know, we're not going to know what it is, but,
Right.
you know, I mean, that's what maybe the planning commission can examine, or the consultant can
There's
examine.
a great example of, on Oak Street, and I can't remember the number of the house,
Yeah.
where the carriage house in the back was converted into housing. And they did a wonderful job.
Mhm.
You could tell it used to be a carriage house, but it's a really nice apartment. And that's the kind of thing I think we want to,
It looks like it belongs there, in
Yeah.
that neighborhood.
yeah, that's the kind of thing we want maybe to figure out how to codify a little bit.
Mhm.
Well, I think we
Okay.
discussed
Yes.
historic resource
Yep,
overlay.
sorry.
Well, we're on the setbacks went to, yes, Steve,
Yeah,
quickly.
I think it's worth just reminding everyone that in this particular iteration of the changes that we're going to be making to the regulations, the grant funding is conditional on providing regulations that allow for an increased amount of housing. And so I don't believe that it precludes us from designating more historic districts or design review districts, which are statutorily two different things. They may be able to be one and the same, but I believe as insofar as it doesn't prevent us from seeing an increased amount of housing production, we could certainly look into adopting those within the same process. It is the same adoption process as another comprehensive zoning change. Like I believe that it takes one public meeting and a
More than that, but that's okay.
two?
Two.
Okay, yeah. But in any event, it's a vote, a simple majority vote of the select board and two public meetings.
Well, two for them, at least one for the planning commission.
That's what I meant, yeah. Okay, so two select board meetings,
Yes.
one, anyhow. I think it's worth saying that preservation can actually be a way to maintain a greater amount of housing. Oftentimes during the urban renewal period, the historic density that was torn down in the name of a different set of values that did not include increased housing density, to be fair. What was built in its place was not a replacement level density. It was almost virtually always lower density, like the west end of Boston is an example. So preserving what did exist prior to our current regulations is certainly a type of activism for housing, even if it might seem potentially like it's maybe blocking housing. So if we can make those two things, which are both worth valuing, not be in conflict with one another, which I think we absolutely can achieve, we could definitely incorporate design review in our increased density in places where that is of importance to the community. So
Well, I think what we're saying is, one of the things that would really help is more about, does it fit the character of the neighborhood, which is what I think we're talking about. And I think if we can define that, I mean, I don't think any of us are opposed to accessory units, and the example that I gave of the conversion of the carriage house on Oak Street back there is a prime example of additional housing. Steve?
Kevin.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin O'Brien. Maybe this is more of a process question, but thinking about where people access that information, and like as far as, say I wanted to buy a house and it did have these historic qualities, where would I find that information to make sure I made the right steps?
Yes, buyer beware right now.
Yeah.
And that's a very good point.
What do we do?
Yeah, well, I guess when real estate transactions happen, the town, it's not common for municipalities to be, an educational party during a real estate transaction,
Yeah.
right? They come in after the fact,
Yeah.
receiving the deed, and
Well, let you know
No,
if it's important.
there are cities and towns who do
that'd be nice.
get right in there.
Yeah.
That'd be nice, maybe, but
Yeah. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
it's buyer beware, due diligence at this point.
Oh.
I'd like to, we've hit the historic thing a lot, but if there's something quick.
When you-
Or response.
Some of the houses that I've seen, especially up in this part of New England, have the actual date on the house. Is that something that's acquired through the historic commission or through just a town
No.
or just a deed?
You can,
No.
you-
It's a long, there's a very long answer to that.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Catherine, it's not as easy as you
All
would
right,
think.
I'm
And yet,
just
it's so
curious.
easy. You can just go to Lotus Graphics and get say I want a sign that says
Okay.
whoever's house and, pick a date.
Okay.
We say it's a beautiful Victorian house, and that's it. No history, anything.
Do you want to put that on the July DRC an explainer for the public? 'Cause
Yeah,
I actually
we
don't know
could.
the answer, so I'd love to hear.
We could.
Okay.
So
Robin can do that.
Oh, right on. Excellent.
we have about 15 minutes for this agenda item left, and there's still the demo standards.
I was interested, what is this pets versus farm animals?
And we have
I
that.
saw that on there and I was like, what is
Yeah.
going on?
And parking, signs, noise, and anything else people
Well,
want
we
to mention.
can,
So
we
if
can talk fast.
Okay.
Nora can talk about the animals.
Yeah, so the pets versus farm animals, we've had a couple of these, none terribly recently, but I can see them coming, where people want to have what we call farm animals as pets. And so we had pigs, and did a lot of research on pigs, and apparently there are some that are small, and these were pets, and they lived in the house. And so we went back and forth on that. I can see people wanting mini goats. We don't have a category for mini goats, but they're really cute, and people are going to want them for pets.
Oh, mini horses.
Yeah, mini horses and all that. And so
you guys
well,
looking
wolves I
for-
think are different.
So are you thinking of, some stricter definition or some sort of process for flexibility
Well,
and the diversity?
I was
of pets?
looking at, it says in the regs, it says small domestic animals.
Yes.
And what is a small domestic
small?
animal? And what's small?
Children.
I mean, maybe we want to talk about a maximum poundage.
Yeah, or
a
There's some
maximum
big
size.
dogs.
or a number even, a poundage and a number. Then you have too many goats, you have too little pets. When you have 10, you have a flock.
Well,
That's a bird, right?
That's another thing, potbelly pig is considered a pet, right?
So just a little more.
They're huge though.
Until they get huge and then.
Well, I've seen a
And
few.
then they're bigger.
so-
I know that Sue will remember the chicken episodes.
Oh,
I was on the camera then, I wasn't on the board then, but what the planning board went through about chickens. People were coming, we had a gallery of people coming in about chickens. So then we had to come up with something about chickens, so maybe we have to come up with something about
Everything else.
goats, pigs, llamas, whatever.
Well, llamas are, I don't know if they're
Llamas are
mini llamas,
big.
and they're big.
And how do we define the
Miniature
hybrid
ones.
dogs? How do we define that before? We talked about that too, about.
Yeah, I mean, dogs are wolves.
I mean, wolves or how do you, I was gonna ask maybe.
Well, now you can get a permit for a hybrid, so.
Yeah,
Anyway, that's
Yeah, and just
animals.
to
thank you.
put it on the list.
Okay.
Yes,
Have you
please.
guys heard of, some places request a veterinarian's signature or
I saw
approval
that.
that this is a
What?
bona fide pet? And I don't know if that has a whole string of, potential problems associated
When I
with it.
did the research, there was a lot of stuff out there about that, and some towns adopted that
It's not
as.
foolproof maybe, but it introduces a check. Steve?
Yeah, I feel like just mentioning, because I think Brian stepped out, I just want to stick up for our administrative officers, enforcement capacity. We really would not love to be, I think, I don't want to speak for Brian, but being the pig police, figuring out what folks have in their own private properties and counting them and weighing them, et cetera, wouldn't really be practically enforceable. So it might be worth considering separating part of that from land use regulation and seeing about what we could have townwide for an ordinance for maybe animal control in that regard. I mean, the dog
But there is a
licenses.
zoning reg about what can be kept.
Right.
Yes, there is.
I'm saying it might be prudent for us not to have that be done through land use.
Yeah, because what happened with that alligator that was in Clark Canal? Does anybody, no one remembers that? Kirsty must remember
Oh,
that.
yeah.
The alligator in Clark Canal?
I don't know.
They had to have it taken away, I
I
think.
remember that.
Okay.
I mean, heard of other animals.
He migrated. Parking.
Yeah, did anyone have thoughts on parking?
Oh,
That was on the
yeah.
list.
A lot of thoughts, buddy, a lot of thoughts.
I know staff has an opinion.
Got a list right here, whole bag.
Well, I have a couple things.
Sure, Mike.
One is, I think we should somehow encourage more charging stations and/or the potential for them.
Yes.
and encourage more shared parking. And possibly make parking optional for an accessory dwelling.
And I suggest more handicap on the
Yes.
street, because it's not, me, a disabled person, trying to
Yes.
find a spot to go way up to get to Amy's Bakery.
Yeah.
That's town parking,
Right.
you should approach traffic safety committee
Yeah,
or.
it's not us.
8 o'clock in the
committee.
morning,
That's right.
okay? Gotta
It's
be
not
up.
us.
Yeah,
This
that's
is-
not,
well,
not
this-
voting.
I
Yeah, but
guess,
don't we say so many
Yeah.
per,
That's in a
Space.
parking lot.
in a lot? Well, I want more in the parking lot.
signage.
There's no mention of handicapped spaces?
There is, we
in our-
require what the ADA requires,
Requires.
and so
It's a certain
sure we
percentage
can
But it could be
probably-
more.
per,
It probably could be above, go above.
Because it is the minimum.
But
This
Main
is-
Street is town parking in the public right of way, so you're gonna have to,
See, Dan?
Right.
I would submit a safety action right
Yeah,
now.
take a picture. Look where I have to walk. Just the way. But, yeah,
where are
also
we now?
signage too, that's what we were talking about, remember?
Yeah, is anyone, anything else with parking or?
I-
move
I
on
would
to the
double
next?
advocate that, what you said about not having parking for ADUs. The only reason why I think that is that some of the streets are really narrow, and then it becomes everybody's problem when people just park all the time on a small side street, because then you can't get around them trying to get out of your driveway. I mean, it can be like hell. Plowing, yeah.
Well,
Quality
you
of
can't
life
park
goes-
on you're not supposed to park on the street when
When
Sure.
it's snowing.
when,
Or,
during, from
6
the,
months.
what was it?
November to
October?
April.
Oh, it's November.
Mm.
October.
But just in general, like even now, there's like a woman in a van who parks out in front of our house all the time, and I can't get the swing, so I have to drive all the way back into my neighbor's driveway so I can get out onto my street. It's just, it's congested. It's hard.
Anything else about parking? Kevin's hand up.
Yeah, and when, just from like a conservation commission point of view, I think having a maximum number of parking rather than a minimum would be preferable.
oh, that's a good idea.
That's
Here,
lovely.
here. I agree.
Kevin in the back.
It's an interesting idea, thank you.
I mean, one thing kind of aligned with that same thing that the planning commission did in its last review of, or amendment to the zoning was we removed the ability of permitted use in the service center having surface parking.
Yeah.
Because it's an inefficient use of space.
Yeah.
And it's conditional now, so now you guys will review it. Okay, on to signs. What were people's thoughts?
This was Brian's thing, I think.
Okay, let's skip that and maybe we'll come back.
It has something
Oh,
that,
sure.
I mean, common scheme, I mean, where you have a building with more than one business. I'm not sure there's enough direction about how the signage should be.
Okay, so there's a little bit in there about common scheme, but maybe not enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, but I think that was really Brian's issue.
Steve had something to say.
Oh, I misunderstood what you meant by signage. I was
I
going
go
to say that's
traffic
actually
signage.
E911, so feel free to ask. But yeah, no, if it's not the numbers itself, then that's
No.
common scheme
No.
signage. But if anyone has questions about numbering for E911,
Good to know.
I also do that.
Oh,
Actually, you
excellent.
mentioning traffic or just building signage? You're saying signage, what do you?
Oh, build, yeah, on the
It's
private
really-
property,
It's about,
Okay.
it's about
the labeling.
So people
building
know what type
Labeling.
of signage.
Businesses and, yeah.
business signage.
Moving on to noise.
Oh,
What was
I'm on canal.
the thought for why that was added?
That was probably me.
It was you, Michael, I was at the DRB meeting last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is a section in there in the nuisance area about noise. I mean, if you go into the ordinance, it's all sorts of, it's, you know, they basically say don't do loud stuff. And at least in this area, you know, it talks about the decibel ratings in the hours and the zones that you're supposed to be in. But there isn't, I mean, nowadays with the, you know, cell phones and everything else, there's probably easier ways to measure this stuff. You know, we had some stuff where, neighbors complained about conditional use.
You're 45 decibels at your peak.
That's exactly, I mean, so that, the way it's set up right now is that it's, you've got to kind of measure the amount of sound that you're going to be putting out over a 15-minute period and averaging it, and that has to be the, I don't know, that if you're at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're set off a few fireworks or something very loud, it doesn't really matter if you're quiet for the next 14 minutes. I don't know.
I hear what you're saying, Michael. I would also argue, though, that that's not a zoning enforcement. That would be more of a civil enforcement in that situation. But I agree that this type of measuring, I mean, the way we're going to measure it is with a phone app like Tom.
But I guess that's a little bit of my concern about this, is that it's important to get that kind of stuff up front. What are we, half-staffed with our police department now? They don't have the capability to come in and address any noise complaints.
Right, and we don't either, so our concern with noise is associated with the land use. So is the business, is the manufacturer that's operating there, that was the theory behind the 15 minutes, right? We're not looking for that spiky peak that is an annoyance. We're looking for, are you operating in a way that is causing, that it's a prolonged period that.
Well, but we get into it, conditional use permits and things like that, where, you're gonna end up having, parties that last into the night in a residential neighborhood. Is that allowed?
There's town noise ordinance for that, not land use.
Well, yeah, but it's sort of like, 10 o'clock, you gotta turn off loud radios.
Yeah.
But what's loud? It doesn't
Yeah,
say.
we've been dealing with that at the town ordinance layer. At the town ordinance level, I'm not, I think for land use purposes, we have to keep it kind of tight. Our office is not gonna get into enforcing loud parties at night.
No,
If it's associated with a gallery or,
I'm not
some sort of use.
saying enforcing it as much as I'm saying that, going along is an awful lot of it's, the whole nuisance thing. If you're going to be increasing your density, you're gonna be having more people closer together, and if you're, more chances for people to be annoyed at each other.
Hold on.
Let me go on to build on what Michael's saying, because I'm agreeing with him here, and in a way that when we're looking at a conditional use, and we'll do that one B&B over there, and that was a conditional use thing, and the neighbor was objecting, and we want to know kind of, having it put here in the land use, because that is a land use issue. It's not a noise ordinance for the town issue. It's a land use issue to grant the conditional use.
So you want to set the expectation.
Right, but there is actually a specific.
Yeah, there is.
Level there.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
can we get more information on what aspect of that is not working? Is it like, if I'm understanding correctly, is it that you're feeling that you don't have enough of an ability to actually get at understanding, is this an appropriate amount of noise, without asking for that to be part of their application materials potentially?
Well, I
So-
that
think
might be it.
part of it is that you have to use a sound meter meets national standards. That's one of the requirements, and why not a cell phone? An app on a cell phone. That's one thing that would make it easier.
Yeah.
Well, we've had situations in even public forums from before about certain places going up. Downtown, okay, it's understandable because you have businesses downtown, versus if you're out in the rural areas out, and how to articulate that as far as noise level, like this construction. It's different types of noises, and it needs to be better language, better articulated, clarified, where it's allowed, how long, because I know like in even certain parts of New York, Park Avenue, after 10 o'clock you make noise, that's $1,000 fine. It's enforced, that's Park Avenue. But here it's like, you know, like you're saying, Mike, it's not enforced because like you said, you don't have that person standing out there. Like with cars and with trucks, like even idle cars, trucks at nighttime where I live at, they can't be idle at that noise.
That's different.
That's
not a man
Police
time.
at night, Brian.
That's not us.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying there's different types of noise regulations for different things.
But our
Businesses.
noise regulation has to do with the potential that somebody is going to get a permit
Right.
for conditional use, or to build a factory, or to
Right.
build something that's going to violate the noise levels.
Or build something and put a rooftop air conditioning on
Yeah.
it that abuts
Yeah, we
a residential
always-
neighborhood. I mean, we had one of those, and the answer
Yes.
to the question about noise was, well, nobody's ever complained about it.
Oh, we had buffers
well,
or something
But,
like that.
you know, but
It's true,
let's,
I mean, we
can
don't
we?
go looking for it, we don't have the
Yeah.
staff
No,
for it.
but now I think we learned from that, and we now ask them to look at the decibel levels.
Yeah.
And to
Oh, no,
say
and
if it's over, they have to baffle. But I'm not quite sure what we do to fix the problem.
Well, let's
Yeah,
say-
that's what I'm
Well, I
wondering.
think I agree with you. It does say, you know, there's
So-
near national standard, and can we make it easier?
Yeah, I mean,
to
some of the
do.
things for odors don't require a national
Right.
standard equipment to detect the, I don't even know if that exists, but
I'm
if
sure-
it says that for odor, they could say that for.
It used to be
Yeah.
more popular to have those equipment. I
Oh,
mean, that
okay.
was, you know, in the early aughts, like,
Right.
you know.
Well, I think Catherine's hands and then Kevin.
I just wanted to say, well, I live in the building that is part of the Hermit Thrush beer. Also, and we'll talk about odors, but they have outside where people come and drink beer. And I will tell you something, they're right there. They make less noise than the motorcycles that go up and down High Street. You know, I can say you can, but you can't regulate the motorcycles.
Not in
That's what
land
I'm
use reg.
saying. I guess it's a matter of, if you're used to living in the city, certain noises don't bother you because it's part of living in the city. And if you're gonna make a more dense area, the people that are going to be living there are probably people like myself who've lived in cities.
Right.
They're not gonna be somebody who's out in the farm who's never
Yeah.
stepped foot in.
So maybe the
Brattleboro.
noise could differ by district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Kevin?
Yeah, one thing first, there are places that have in place essentially microphones on streets, and if your vehicle is over a certain decibel, it takes a picture and you get a ticket that way automatically.
Hey,
They roll it in
So-
dough.
I hit Canal Street with all
So that's an option. I did want to, the noise thing came up through one of the Brattleboro Facebook group recently, and somebody did post the Brattleboro Code, section 13-102, and then it goes on to item D, which kind of gets to the point of how loud is loud and what's unreasonable. And I think it spells out pretty clearly what level is acceptable or not. So I don't know if there's additional information, but I think that should be reviewed before moving forward on looking at noise in this way.
Right, I didn't want to get into the part of the DRB, that's them with loud mufflers. Like I said, where I live at, it sounds like an airport every day.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a whole separate thing. When you're talking about land use, like you were saying with construction, you've asked people, and they said they put up buffers and all that and everything to keep the noise level down. So I think that should be also looked into as well, also making sure that they have some type of buffers.
Yeah. Okay, behind time here, I think, we didn't do the demo standards. Can that be advocated for real quickly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that I posted some stuff, or Sue posted for me some links on, and maybe we could make this more available to the public or something, I don't know how that
Maybe we
works.
could make a form for.
But I'm interested in including a demolition delay standard in any revised regs. And I think that it doesn't, if you look at what happened in Charlestown and you look at the Boston regs, it doesn't prevent development at all. People think demo delay is going to prevent development. It doesn't. It just says, you know, we need to look at the building before you destroy it. You need to talk about certain elements of it. I think they're kind of different between Boston and Charleston, but
Yes.
we can have our own standards. And really explain why you want to demolish it instead of rehabbing it. And most places it's buildings over 50, that were built more than 50 years ago. And that's the majority of buildings in Brattleboro.
So when you say really explain why the desire to demolish it instead of rehab it, then once the person explains, then can they just demo it, or?
No, it has
Yeah.
to go, it has to go before, some places it's the Historic Review Committee, which has more power than ours does. Some places it's the DRB, or the zoning board in Boston, I think, has the final say.
Mhm.
The zoning board is basically the DRB. And then a decision's made whether it can be demolished or not. And if
Unless it's a safety hazard,
And if it-
immediate safety hazard.
Yeah, if it's an immediate safety hazard, it has to come down.
And in the one that you gave us the example, it says you need a structural, if it's structurally motivated, that you need a structural engineer to tell, or we could probably even say the fire department here, because we have that, possibly that capability, so that'd be an easy fix.
And you guys know, you've obviously reviewed our section on demolition, and it's lacking, right?
Yeah.
In your minds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Um,
I'm sorry John isn't here,
Right.
because he was really one of the people that was pushing the demo delay.
I would just also add, the DRC has had a lot of conversations about the lackingness of our demolition standards, and also even the materials that are presented to help make a recommendation. So
Yeah.
we've got, Steve and I have.
There's lots of
that
other
as
good
well.
examples of towns out there, cities that have
Yep.
different.
We've talked about the idea of it at one meeting a few months ago. Okay, anything else quickly with most of the parts of the land use regs that aren't administrative procedures? They're already delayed, so maybe we should just move on. Okay, this section's about part 4, the administrative procedures, and a few things were already generated, such as the DRB's review criteria for energy and energy conservation, and conditional use dimensional waiver authority, landscaping, I think site plan review and maybe PUD review were on there. Does any DRB or members want to take that away, or DRC?
The PUD.
I'll say that in the DRB review criteria where it talks about energy, I mean, I find those sections a little sloppy and unclear.
Yeah.
They just say, like, you know, I can't find it now, but basically that, you know, energy conservation measures may include, and that has a list of 4 things, but,
And
and
it
one of
says
those things, and one of those things at the end is actually isn't energy conservation, it's energy generation. So that should be in the other section.
Yeah, I agree. And it says something about to the extent economically and physically feasible.
And
Well,
the applicants always go, yes, we did.
Yeah.
we looked at that,
Yeah,
and we don't have any really way of measuring that. Maybe the the Conservation Committee could come up with some language.
Well,
that would help us.
all of our other regs could have the same barometer on them, in the sense of if they were phrased the same way, like, as
Well,
long as
this
it's
is-
economically and financially feasible, then they can say, oh yeah, okay, no, it's not for us to do the parking.
Right.
No, it's not for us to do the historic
Yeah, and we
preservation.
don't, and we
No,
don't.
it's not for us to
And this
every-
is the only one that kind of says that.
Yeah,
And so, I don't know, we need a definition of what's feasible, what's economically
Yeah, like,
realistic, maybe some.
When it comes up in relation to parking, we can look at that, you know, we have enough expertise to look at the parking plan and go, oh, no, this isn't right, you know, no. But the energy stuff, how do you do that without the expertise, I guess?
I mean,
Really.
they show us plans sometimes. And-
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and Michael, our engineer, can tell us whether it looks feasible.
Yeah, but like you say, Tom, it doesn't have any, you know, it's our duty to kind of enforce the rules that are there. And if the rule comes out and doesn't have any teeth to it, that it says, do this if you want,
yeah.
it kind of slows us down quite a bit.
Mhm.
You know, we really don't have we can ask the questions and, you know, kind of push them towards these things, but you really can't deny them because they say, nah.
Mhm.
I mean, the only energy thing that's our biggest concern is the electric cars, you know, getting the stations in. If they have a generator or something that they want to put in, how much noise does it make? And usually the neighbors will come, you know, but generally, I don't think we do anything like control whether they have solar panels or, you know, that kind of stuff.
No,
It's
we
just-
asked
It's just
them.
so
So,
big
I
right
mean,
now.
that's kind of
15.
energy I'm thinking of.
And technology is
Yeah.
changing so much, you know,
Yeah.
you've got, you know, heat pumps now where all of a sudden electricity, you know, and, you know, your fuel oil's, you know, what, $6 a gallon, and your electricity for a heat pump, all of a sudden,
Mhm.
you know, wow, wasn't too long ago, I remember where, you know, people were saying, no, you can't put in electric heating,
Mhm.
you know, just because it's so inefficient.
That's a different type of electric heating. Yeah.
But it's, you know, but the same thing, so I think we kind of got to work at trying to keep up
Yeah,
with technology.
Yeah, the only thing we can do with 11, I mean, the criteria 11 is say, are you gonna put in insulation? What kind of insulation are you gonna do? You know, or
One thought I've had, and I wonder if the DRB would be receptive to it, is there's something, I'm not proposing a building code thing, but an example is I think in Massachusetts, the building code for certain sorts of buildings, not like single-family houses, I don't think, but larger structures, often with flat roofs and that are, you know, much bigger, have to have solar-ready zones, meaning that they're not required to put a solar panel installation. But if it's a new building or a significantly renovated one, I think they have to design the roof such that it will have the future possibility of engineeringly being able to hold solar panels.
Well,
And they'll
yeah.
put the HVAC equipment and stuff, not all spread out, obnoxious, you know, interfering in the way, but, so that way there's the future possibilities. Certainly that adds cost, but it's not as much as just saying, hey, put in a $100,000 solar panel
yeah,
installation.
we do ask whether they have the capacity to add solar panels.
And an awful lot of it, you know,
And
one of
if
the
they
things
say
that
yes, what are we gonna, and,
Well,
you know.
but we also run into is it getting in the way of a neighbor putting up solar panels?
Right, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So I was wondering if there's anybody that does anything that says the energy conservation measures are feasible if they're no more than a certain percentage of the total cost of the building or something like that. I don't know whether there's anything like that
No, you can't
anyplace.
do that.
Yep.
So Vermont, for construction, Vermont has, you know, the energy code for commercial and for residential, and the contractors are supposed to fill out, I mean, it's self-governing, so you fill out this little form.
Yeah.
But as far as like sort of the renewable energy and putting into the grid, I wonder if that's something that maybe with GMP or one of the other, or one of the solar companies or all the solar companies, you could talk to them about that.
You might even consider touching base with Efficiency Vermont.
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
usually work with you
They,
with that.
they
Well,
have, that's an awful lot of what they,
We
as FINA try to
we
do.
put that in as one of the conditions on everything that we do,
Right.
that they'll consult
Yeah.
with Efficiency Vermont.
They have made leaps and bounds.
But,
'Cause there's a lot that goes into it.
It's
You have to
all-
make sure the
Yeah.
roof is, yeah, if it's a existing
Structural.
building, if it, yeah, the roof
Yeah.
can handle the load, and, I mean, it can get convoluted
So
pretty
some of these
quickly.
things might already be required, that we're bouncing ideas around or something.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is that a state permit category?
Yes.
Okay,
I can send you the link.
yeah.
Okay.
And that's similar to like land trust too, because there's certain things you can put on, just like historical buildings, you could add to in addition, the people who are
no,
purchasing.
no,
Okay. Big
no.
difference.
So,
yeah.
so those are things that we could probably use to flesh out
Yeah.
this criteria. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait,
Yep, Steve.
super quick, I think it's worth mentioning as well that most of those review categories are not dictated by statute. A few of them are, so they could just be struck if they're redundant with state review, or, you know, substantially limited if it's not necessarily.
I don't think it's,
contributing.
I don't think they're redundant. I think we need it there, we just need it to be clearer.
I agree, without learning more at this point.
The language.
There was conditional use dimensional waiver authority. Expanding it, I think, maybe, or strengthening it was someone's thought?
I think this was a Brian one, and I think the idea is more authority for the DRB to issue waivers, possibly considering conditional use criteria. I don't know if any DRB members, if that's
Yeah, I think
anything
it
you've
had to do,
discussed with him.
I think it goes hand in hand with the whole setback issue
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
I think looking for more waiver authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty limited right now.
I think he described it to me briefly, and I believe that the idea is that we have that very specific range of flexibility right now, and one step beyond that is just not something that has a pathway to approval. But having it become a conditional use to propose something beyond that range, that would allow for additional flexibility in cases that have a contextual reason for that.
the dimensional.
Because theoretically, we do have variances, but you basically can't satisfy the requirements for one of those.
We have never issued a variance.
No.
And I don't think anybody in the state
Yeah.
has issued a variance that has not been overturned by the
There are no
environmental
Oh,
court.
okay, so that's not something we can change in the
No,
right
it's-
state's
no.
limiting, okay.
But the waiver.
But waiver is broad.
Waiver we can't.
Yes.
Okay,
We just, in the last regs, chose to only issue them for certain things.
okay.
So,
Okay, we got that. What about landscaping? I hear that there's some frustration with the landscaping regs. At least I've heard that.
So we've heard feedback from some landscape architects that, you know, in one sense, call it a dream. But then there's also been some criticisms, I think, over the cost, but also the size of plantings that we're requiring, and that we should be thinking of, what's that guy talking about? The health of the.
Oh, yeah. The just sort of longer time scale of the, I guess the lifespan of the landscape as a living thing, and how you're not gonna have that forever.
Yeah, I think he was also trying to get at, you know, we've specified the caliber of plantings, but wouldn't it be better to have less but require a larger caliber so that they, you know, will take and grow quicker, is one of the things. So we've just heard from some landscape architects that have done site plan, prepared site plans and worked on them, that
were
they're a lot.
cramping. Yeah.
And that maybe having less but
Less and
require larger
better.
plantings,
More mature.
at more mature plantings at the time of
Viable.
installation, that might be better.
Okay, I thought I also heard from someone that they're, that the landscaping regs are just pretty, very complex and
Yes.
kind of
They
confusing.
they are complex.
Is that just the way that they should be, and that we should just bite our thumbs, if that's the right phrase, or?
No, it's the way that they are. Ours are.
I know,
There
yeah.
are less complex
Yeah, so, okay,
out there.
could look into that.
They're not required by statute either. I think we all likely support there being a regulation for landscaping, but theoretically, you're not having to do that.
And without looking and doing any prior research, sorry, I was a little late to add to the meeting invite, but if there isn't things in there about invasive species not being planted, we should include those.
That there is.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll segue that then to say that in this Part 4 administrative procedures, it shows, maybe I'll be the only one to admit that I don't have all, 500 pages of our town plan and land use regs memorized. I was reviewing that and I realized that the Conservation Commission it's not being practiced currently, but seems to have the same ability as the Design Review Committee to give advice to the DRB about land development projects. Obviously not about historic districts, but about conservation issues.
Oh, cool.
So, what do people think about that?
I liked it. It's good. Anything indigenous.
Maybe you're not,
Yeah.
I
I
think-
mean,
indigenous
receptive,
species.
Yeah,
interested? Yeah.
yeah. I think we'd want to kind of figure out what the scope of it is. It's pretty clear with the design review committee, it's the historic resource overlay,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I mean, there is, in the regs, there is a little stronger wording for the design review committee. It doesn't say what their decision is binding, but it says like they will review projects, whereas it says Conservation Commission may review projects, so that's something. Doesn't
Well, I
have
like
be a
to say
formal
that,
process.
a lot of times when we have people, we always, and you can quote me on this, when people come up, we mention about setbacks or conservation, indigenous, we always bring that up in any huge projects or whatever, preservation of the area. So having more information on that would be great. And that way we'd have a better idea of what's back there, what's going on, so we can incorporate that with our information that we set up.
So I think I'd like to hear what the Conservation Committee might like to advise on. That would be great to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, large development projects in existing forested or agricultural land, or agricultural committee could certainly weigh in more helpfully on agricultural land. But, land that is at present contributing to the sequestration and storage of carbon is definitely feels like that's something we would love to, be part of any conversation on. Not like, taking out a few trees here and there, but like functional, forest or otherwise sequestering ecosystems. So yeah, that sort of thing. Stuff about invasives. The stuff that you were talking about previously about energy stuff, I think the energy committee would probably be much better positioned to speak to those things. That's not really much that we don't interact with that. We might have some personal expertise, but not as a committee.
Yeah, and I think the idea of the even homes and the landscape being an ecosystem is exciting. There's been an identified early detection species of grass over in the High Lawn area, and that will eventually take over, kind of be a carpet which blocks out some of the native species and alters the ecosystem. So we've been trying to figure out ways to work with that and neighbors with limited success. So those types of things are, I think, interesting to the current commissioners.
Well, we can figure out how you can review stuff for us. I think our agenda's always published early, and so if something looks interesting,
Well, I think we need to set up a process, like,
Yeah,
with the
that's what I'm
DRC,
saying. I'm
it's
looking
pretty
at
clear
Sue.
what they look at, you know, it's like, okay, things in this area, but with, that, we don't have an avenue to bring it up, so.
There is a defined statutory context for a conservation commission in Vermont, and it does sort of give the guardrails on how much and what kind of input in terms of land use can be given. I don't know if that's what you were.
No, well, what I was gonna say, you know, we have things set up in the land use regulations so that when the DRC is currently making recommendations, it's pretty clear what they're commenting on, and
Yeah.
that doesn't really exist in the current land use regulations. As of right now, the Conservation Commission can always look at the DRB agenda and participate as an interested person. You know, I think we want to be careful about advising to the DRB without actually having that very clear criteria.
Yes.
So right now, they can always look at any application
Yeah,
and talk about it
comment,
at their meetings.
and comment, that's what I was.
But it's
come to the
commenting
meeting.
as just an interested
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
with no special standing, like the DRC kind of has
And
process right now.
I think we should also just remind ourselves again that we are precluded from taking on any new regulations that can restrict housing development for this grant funding.
Well, but we can still talk about it though.
Okay.
Because some of it's being funded with the grant, some of it will come out of the department.
Oh, so we can do both?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And then,
I don't know what site plan review.
well, I just have a general, maybe it'll include that. We put together, Steve put together for us just a list of, not necessarily saying which regs should be changed or not, but just for the sake of discussion at planning commission meetings, a list of regs that potentially add cost to housing development, just because housing is, the topic nowadays. And looking at that in general, it made me think to ask the DRB about how do you feel about the sort of philosophical balance of having more review powers, but that kind of holding up or costing or delaying the development side of the thing, versus possibly loosening up on some review powers, but making it easier for housing development to happen. Are you happy the way things are? Would you be willing to give a little bit?
I think it's
Maybe
a
that's too
question of
general
more
of a point.
administrative review as opposed to DRB review.
Yeah, the elevator pitch version of what, I think it was my comment that got this on the agenda. I don't know if someone else had brought up site plan review, but what we were essentially thinking is in the state's guidance from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, their zoning for great communities or great neighborhoods, in any event, they're very strongly recommending that communities not have site plan review for multifamily residential projects be done at the DRB level, and have that be done by the administrative officer so that it can go much quicker. And I mean, at the moment we have duplexes and single family. Those site plans are not reviewed by the Development Review Board. The only reason why something of that nature would be before the DRB is if it's up for conditional use review. But the other piece of this that we wanted to tie in is to really strongly dial back the amount of conditional uses that we have, and only have conditional uses, I mean, particularly in residential uses, to only have the residential use be conditional if there is a really genuinely compelling reason why that might not be appropriate in any particular case, because otherwise we're adding a lot of scrutiny to housing projects when we've established this very urgent need to have them come through. So in the case of something like a industrial plant or a sewer, sewage processing facility, if there's real concerns about the appropriateness of that thing in its context, that's what we have conditional use review for. But it really seems like having that for apartment buildings is sort of a vestige of I'll just say, to be charitable, a different value system that is strongly advocated against by the state.
Immediate
I
thoughts?
would say that for multifamilies, that's where we really need to review. For the appropriateness for the neighborhood and for parking issues and just energy use and what else do we
So
know?
how many multifamily, like when you say multifamily, how many units are you
Well, the
thinking?
IBC would say 4. Anything 4 and above is considered really multifamily.
Yeah, I mean, things like the conversion of the bank down here. I think it was a good thing that we looked at that.
So I'm gonna call Tom on his question and say, why does it have to be an either or? And I think we could look to see how we can speed things up, regardless of the question of more or less oversight, and just make it work faster than it does. Now, how that happens, I don't know. But you know, when you look at the process, you know, and I'm sure in the conditional use and all this stuff, there's stuff that we could let go, you know, and say we don't need to see it. But regardless, we need to make it work faster.
I have a thought about that as far as it's sort of from life safety in general. When you're putting more and more people into sort of areas, and it's probably good to get the DRB to take a look at how that's going to play out. If it's anything above 4 families, I mean, if you think of some of the fires that we've had, I'm sorry, I always go back to that, but you know, then everybody is sort of without, and nobody wins in those scenarios. And there's sometimes just having sort of thoughtful, not that you guys don't do thoughtful review, geez, that is not what I meant. Hold on. But having,
No, I know what you mean. It's
More eyes on the project.
yes.
yeah. It's like even having to prepare for it means they have a better plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You know, I know that developers probably don't like all the questions that we ask.
I don't mind.
And we're talking, I mean, and Robin can speak to that because she just had to appear before the board, 3 times on a project?
Not all of them are good.
Because the plan wasn't prepared. And I think those questions get asked for a reason.
Okay, over time, but let's power through the rest. And maybe there will be nothing to say, but the last agenda item, unless anyone has anything else quickly on the
you're an
administrative
optimist.
procedures. What's that?
You're an optimist.
I had one question. I did see the planned unit development review on here, and I didn't know whether that
I
was.
think I just threw it on there, but I didn't necessarily.
I was wondering what that was about.
That's another committee?
No, we do that.
Occasionally.
It's basically when you.
Yeah, are you guys-
Increase density, where you don't have everything on its own lot, where you have one area with a number of housing units or mixed uses usually.
Yeah,
Right,
a
yeah.
big example of that is the Black Mountain Senior Housing. That was a planned unit development.
SD Organ Factory Planned Unit Development.
Yes, and
Well,
we're gonna be looking at Commonwealth Dairy, which is part of a planned unit development.
Actually, they pulled out. They're not in
Oh.
there.
Now, is Winston
They're
Prouty
not
still
in
in that also?
Winston
They-
Prouty
That's
is
ideal.
it.
Yeah, Winston
But
Prouty.
Winston Prouty
Prouty
is
is
now, and
There are
will
some
continue to
things
be.
Tom, with the PUD that staff has found that we can talk about with the planning commission, though, just certain types of PUDs aren't allowed in certain districts, so, you know, some consideration, and whether or not there's enough flexibility within the PUDs.
I mean, have you guys found the process, the review process for PUDs to be fair, adequate,
Well, we've
thorough?
only had a couple.
Yeah,
I think I'm
we-
the longest serving person on the
Mhm.
DRB right now, and we've only had a couple, and I think it's
It will
gone pretty
likely,
well.
it will
It's gone well.
likely come more so.
Yeah,
So-
I
Over
mean,
time.
I'm looking at that development behind Winston Prouty that they're talking about, for example.
Mhm.
I have a feeling they're probably gonna do that as a PUD.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if it already
They'll have
is,
to.
They would have
isn't it?
Yeah, they'll have to because they're in the institutional zone.
Yeah, because it's all, it's
So-
community land type of thing, and
Yeah, the institutional zone requires all development to be in a master plan, which I think has to be a PUD. But I just wanted to point out too that what you guys are seeing at the DRB is what does get submitted. So at least as of fairly recently, there has been more interest in things that might be capturable by a PUD, but just can't be proposed given our current standards. Like there was one recently where there's really nothing wrong with the housing development that was proposed, but with the way that our standards work right now, it's just
didn't have
completely
enough,
impossible.
is it didn't have enough mixed use, or?
No, it basically would have been perfect for a cottage cluster PUD, but that zone just is precluded from having them. Well, if they wanted to use that parcel for more than one single-family house, that's not allowed without a PUD. And then they also couldn't do a traditional neighborhood PUD. If they wanted to do duplexes, the minimum acreage was going to be a problem. So then, attached housing, row housing is actually allowed. That would have been doable, but they didn't want to. So, and actually subdivision wouldn't have worked either. So, theoretically they had one option. They just didn't want to go with that one. But still, I mean, a cottage cluster is something that we offer as a way to try to offer flexibility, and it wasn't working in this particular case. So there have been some examples of that don't get to the DRB.
Well, I don't have any problem with changing standards for a PUD.
Yeah.
I just noticed it there, and I just, didn't, it hasn't come across our desk,
Yeah.
so to speak, much.
It doesn't make
the
it to you.
point, so-
Yeah, I just wanted to, just
But
as
no,
a
but I mean,
survivorship bias kind of
it
thing.
might be prudent to take another look at it to see if there was more options available.
I think we have a list, right, Sue, of possible PUD sites? So we can get that
That's fine.
circulated to the.
I think back in 2015, when you were redoing those and we self-appointed ourselves, there were 5 of us, we reviewed these before they were, went to the select board, or the select board was going through them, so we went to the commissioners to talk about it, and that was one of the issues that we had a hard time getting ourselves around. But they would love to talk to you about that again, I'm sure. Just what you need.
Okay, for the additional tools desired for performing our roles, which were defined earlier, I just threw something from statutes. That's not necessarily the limit of tools we could use, but it's just something to get the conversation started. But we're 10 minutes, beyond our closing time. But if anyone has anything quick, anything that jumped out at them. Some of these things aren't even, DRB or planning commission, like the tax stabilization contracts and tax increment financing, but they're all tools to, implement the town plan. Just some things to think about.
So any additional Q&As could be sent to you or Sue, I guess, from this meeting? Any ideas or thoughts?
Yeah, and we can keep talking amongst ourselves below a quorum.
So, no LML.
So we're supposed to have our public comment section in there, and we're delayed. If you'd like to say anything, Lena, no obligation. Our only member of the public.
At no cost to you.
Thanks for attending.
Thank you, nothing new today.
Okay.
That'd be cool.
Great, well, we could have gone a lot longer talking about other things and
Yeah.
the things we did for greater periods of time, but we agreed on an hour and a half, so it's over. I adjourn this meeting.
Second.
No, I think we